Please welcome Navjeet Bhasin, Chief Executive Officer and Founder, Newmine, with Jessica Binns, Managing Editor and Technology Editor, Sourcing Journal.
Well, hope everyone is enjoying the day so far. And Navjeet, thank you for joining me for a conversation about everyone's favorite topic, reducing returns. So McKinsey data put the value of online returns somewhere around 25% back in 2020, and with all the growth in e-commerce since then, we're probably can expect that returns rate to be up at this point. So why do you think the industry hasn't really focused on reducing returns in apparel?
Well, a couple of factors. One is, it's always been assumed as a cost of doing business. Secondly, there is no true owner of returns if you look inside any retail organization or a brand. And thirdly, all along it's been assumed, hey, it's a complex problem to solve. And when you don't have a true owner, it's assumed it's complex, obviously it doesn't get the attention. And more importantly, when a retailer or a brand builds their P&L for the year, they're assuming, hey, 20%, if that's your average return, it's acceptable. And when you accept that fact, nobody's incentivized to reduce returns. Nobody's accountable to reduce returns. And that's why it's been a problem. In fact, returns were a problem even back in the catalog industry days. E-commerce just made it exponential higher.
And here we are. So we've all heard about Walmart, Target, all these big retailers kind of slashing their products, slashing prices because they just have too much on their hands. So if retailers were already cutting prices months ago to deal with this problem, can people actually afford to cut prices further into the holidays if they're already stuck with too much product? And what happens to margins at this point?
Well, the moment we as consumers decide to return a product, margin's already lost. And then retailers are trying to find ways to, hey, how do I reap any margin that can be either by getting the product back faster, optimizing the reverse supply chain journey, refurbishing it and reselling it, right? But what if we can go back to the basics rather than reacting to returns? Hey, can we learn from early returns and prevent any future returns? Because you know what, returns provide insights which can not only help reduce in-season returns, but the long-tail impact is sharing those insights back with your suppliers, with your sourcing agents. I mean, most of the people in the room over here, right? Sourcing. I mean, what if you could share those insights back with them, the entire supply chain, the entire value chain benefits? And hey, consumers don't like to do returns. Retailers don't like returns. Brands don't like it. Manufacturers don't like it. Why can't we think different about returns? Rather than processing them, which again, I'll say, we cannot eliminate returns, but at least the reasons or the controllable returns which we can learn from earlier on in the selling season, that can help reduce returns. I mean, just think of it, right? $1 billion retailer, if the return is, let's say, 20%, that's $200 million revenue leakage. And you spend X amount of dollars to generate the top line demand, but once you lose that, I mean, margins are gone. And hey, like I said, consumers are not happy returning. Consumers want to have option to return should they have to return. So again, getting back to the basics of being proactive about understanding why is the customer not keeping the product. Once we understand the root cause, only then you can take an action to solve it.
It all starts with knowledge. So your hero product at Newmine is Chief Returns Officer. Can you tell us how that works?
Well, when we were looking out in the industry, and I can bet you there's no single retailer who has a title called Chief Returns Officer whose actual job is to optimize returns or control returns. A lot of optimization has already happened in the processing, the movement of returns, right? But imagine if somebody owned that P&L of returns and focused on reducing returns, and that person could be the Chief Returns Officer. So we called our technology Chief Returns Officer for that reason, because you know what? Returns is the unsexy part of the retail business. Nobody wants to deal with it in the whole value chain, right? So our platform actually helps retailers understand, hey, why did that return happen? And we help them understand in early part of the selling season. We just don't stop there. We take them all the way to, hey, what if they don't take any action on this? What would the return predict up to be? We actually help them tell why it is happening, what action to take, and we actually facilitate a workflow collaboration. Hey, some reasons could be as simple as the product image or the product copy is not as it should be. Think of it, right? When you're selling or when a customer is in their buying journey, could you give them more data points so that they can understand the product better? Hey, maybe they shouldn't even have bought that product to begin with. And I think it was Stacy from Zappos who mentioned earlier, hey, these are the low-hanging fruits, things that if you're selling, how do you make sure that it is a sale that the customer is going to keep? And actually, I remember when Andy Dunn in his keynote this morning talked about e-commerce profitability. We believe returns reduction is that low-hanging fruit. It can add, a couple of percentage points to your EBITDA. And I come from a retail M&A background, and EBITDA focus was ingrained into us all along. At the end of the day, hey, retail is a for-profit business. How do we ensure we can retain more margin of the product that we are already selling?
So when a retailer or brand comes to you, how does that conversation typically start, and where does it often evolve? What might be most surprising that they discover after they're using the Chief Returns Officer?
Well, what they discover is the true reasons of returns. Customers or the consumers are not incentivized to give the right return reason back. They're going to take the first, especially in the online world, they're going to pick the first reason code which will get them their money back. But you know what? Customers or consumers are still giving you signals through other media, whether it is social media or product review or your call center conversations, they're still giving you signals. So we use those signals to actually start predicting returns earlier on in the selling season. And that's where we believe is the real crux. And any of the retailers that we've brought on board, the first thing we do is show them their historical trend, and it's surprising to them what they find as the root cause. Because as you can imagine, right, retailers don't have people sitting around just chasing returns, and that's why we are laser focused on helping retailers understand that root cause. Because the biggest misnomer, especially in the fashion, is, oh, they're buying to try it out. But you'll be surprised once you get under the covers. No doubt that is one of the biggest reasons for return, but there are other at least 60 to 70% reasons that can be controlled by the retailer or the brand. And we focus on those. You know what? We cannot eliminate returns, right? I was born in India. There was no concept of returns back in the days. We'll never get there because thanks to Amazon and the Zappos, they've spoiled consumers like us for the right reasons because consumers demanded it. But a typical retailer cannot really survive.
And so from your perspective, who within a company or which division or which executive within the company owns returns and who should actually return it or own it?
Well, it should be Chief Returns Officer, right? But that doesn't exist. And so what happens is everybody gets impacted by returns, whether it is operations because they got to deal with the volume of returns coming back and move it around quickly. Merchandising is impacted, sourcing is impacted. So everybody is impacted by returns, but nobody is accountable for reducing returns. So the clients that we deal with, it typically is falling either under the head of supply chain or the head of merchandising. And because you know what? The insights that we bring back to the table impact the entire value chain. In fact, one of our clients took our insights and shared with their major vendors back in India, and they were collaborating on opportunities for the subsequent seasons. So at the end of the day, it's a win-win for brands, retailers, consumers, and not to mention, it's one of those low-hanging fruits. If somebody is serious about their ESG mission, environmental sustainability, if they're serious about checking the box on sustainability, I think returns reduction is one of that low-hanging fruit they got to pay attention to, because there is a solution out there now.
Are you seeing clients actually starting to talk about returns reduction in terms of sustainability in a meaningful way?
Very few are. Again, it's, what we saw before COVID was everybody was trying to talk about sustainability. But then COVID hit, and it was, hey, how do we exist? Forget about sustainability. And now sustainability is back in, and we saw in one of the presentations, I think from AlixPartners, hey, only 18% are really measuring the impact of sustainability. Again, the point is, returns can be one of that low-hanging fruit to go after. I mean, think of it this way, right? Throughout the day, and thanks to Sourcing Journal, I think this session was very strategically placed. We talked about the product technical design, how do we create the products, et cetera, and then logistics getting delivered. And guess what then? Boom, returns happen. Come on. You put all that effort to go in and create products, and if your customers aren't keeping it, you got to think differently about returns.
Yeah, you don't want your experience to fall apart right on the finish line there.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, NRF study showed that between 2020 and 21, returns increased by about 56%. Obviously, the e-com demand went through the roof and returns followed the same pattern. But what we found was some of our clients, they actually were reducing returns while the industry saw increasing returns. I mean, think of it this way, right? If 18% returns reduction while the rest of the industry is seeing an upward trend, I would call, double dipping right there, right? Why not? So it's one of those, hey, revenue leakage is happening. Are you serious about handling it? And so industry is waking up to it. And we've been working with several public big name retailers, and they're seeing the impact. I mean, some of them have actually put returns optimization and reduction as part of their top 3 strategic initiatives.
And are you seeing more interest from these kind of big publicly traded retailers, or do you work with small brands as well? Is there any barrier to entry?
No, we work with brands as small as $10 million brands, all the way to tens of billions of dollars brands.
So it's really something for everyone.
Absolutely. Hey, anybody who's selling physical merchandise, whether it is online or even at the store, right? They have a returns problem. Now, hey, for a $100 million retailer, it may be a $20 million problem, but for a $10 billion retailer, it's a $1 billion problem. I mean, $1 billion returns problem, there aren't even a lot of retailers who are as big as $1 billion. So imagine it's like a reverse P&L. Right. I'm getting the dollars in, but then I'm giving it back out.
Right. Well, final question before we wrap it up, but drilling down specifically within clothing, within footwear, are there opportunities where brands can really drive meaningful results?
Well, so it really varies by the product category and even subcategories for that matter. We've seen results or reduction in returns anywhere from 15 to 20%, and these are conservative numbers. And we're not asking retailers to add additional headcount to do it. We're just making their existing workforce productive because we automate through our machine learning and AI capability, we are getting them to not only the root cause, we are actually whispering in their ear, hey, go take this action on this particular style. I mean, just think of it this way, right? If you're carrying hundreds, if not thousands of styles active at any given point in time, it's humanly impossible to chase issues happening across the board, unless you have an army of analysts sitting out there, which I don't think a typical retailer has today.
Probably not. Well, we are out of time, unfortunately, but Navjeet, thank you for a great conversation, and if you're interested in learning more, please find him at his booth in the back. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.